And now, your go-to source for year-round fantasy hockey advice, DFS, and betting coverage. This is NHL Fantasy on Ice, presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
T-minus 15 days until the NHL trade deadline. It's time to preview it all with a fantasy spin, of course, brought to you by good friends over at Skip. Welcome to another episode of NHL Fantasy on Ice, Week 19, Mailbag Edition. Nick Alberga, Pete Jensen, and Anadu with you. What's going on, Pete?
What's up, Nick? Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL, and the trade deadline always seems to deliver. Sometimes the moves happen in the days leading up to the deadline, which this year is March 8th. But Anna, really excited about some of these names that are on the block.
Yeah, it snuck up on me just a little bit, and I know a lot of teams are missing just that one piece to become contenders, so it's going to be a busy one, I think.
I'm sorry, guys. Excitement's not the word I would use to describe the trade deadline this year, and hopefully these GMs pull something, a rabbit out of the hat, as we bring in today's guest, Dave Pagnotta from the NHL Network Radio, of course, the fourth period. Dave, thank you so much for your time, obviously, today, 15 days away from the trade deadline. Please tell me there's some action here, man. There's not many names out there anymore.
See, we got spoiled last year, Nick, because there was so much activity leading up to the deadline. It was like a domino trickle effect. We thought that was going to be the case this year after Lindholm went and Monahan went less than 24 hours later. But yeah, things have jammed up quite a bit across the board, but there will be activity. There's going to be a lot of movement. Are we going to see 30 trades on deadline day? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. We'll see what happens over these next, 14 days before we get to deadline day. But there are a lot of players out there, and there's going to be a lot of impactful moves that are going to help some teams and maybe not work out so great for others.
I'm here for a goalie move, and a big one at that, Dave. I want to hear your thoughts on whether UC Saros is going to get traded. Is it going to be John Gibson? Maybe it'll just be the Sellers here in the Calgary Flames and Jacob Markstrom, but regardless of which one of those three joins some of the key playoff and Stanley Cup contenders that need goaltending help, it's fantasy relevant all day, man.
Yeah, and certainly if Calgary and New Jersey can figure things out, this would have happened yesterday. This trade between New Jersey and the Flames that would send, and I say would because it's not dead yet. I think that they're going to circle back, the Devils will, to try to make this happen with Calgary, but it's all about the finances. Alex Holtz was the key piece going back to Calgary as part of that deal, and they were looking to have Calgary retain about $2 to $3 million of that contract. Now he's got a $6 million cap hit, so that's almost half. They were almost there. They agreed on everything, and last minute, somebody put the kibosh on it and said, no, on Calgary's side, we're not going to end up paying that amount of money. So they're going to try to make things work. If they can over these next 2 weeks, then we'll see Jacob Markstrom go to New Jersey. He's willing to do it. He's willing to waive there officially. It's just a matter of them kind of rejigging the whatever the overall package was that includes Alex Holtz. So we'll see if they can make that work. And UC Saros, I think, is directly behind him in terms of the top goalies that could move ahead of this deadline. I think that if Saros doesn't move in the next couple of weeks, I think there is a very, very good chance he will be traded in the summer. They really love Askarov coming up. They're very high on him. He's been absolutely lights out and just a total dynamo in the AHL. We'll see kind of what happens here with the Predators and how they move forward. But Saros also very much available. Maybe New Jersey pivots and goes in that direction, or maybe another team kind of swoops in. But if Saros isn't moved in the next couple of weeks, expect him to go come summertime.
Staying on the goalie train, another team that was said to be in the mix to get a goaltender was the Carolina Hurricanes, but it seems like they have too many, Dave, right now. With Frederik Andersen coming back rather soon for the Canes, does that kind of take them out of that conversation, or do you think they're still hunting to add a piece back there?
No, I think they're set. With Freddie set to come back in the next week or two, depending. I mean, he feels good. He'd come back in the next couple of days if he could, but they want to slow play this, just make sure he's fully ready to go. He's been on the ice. He's been skating. He's been ready to go. So we're going to, kind of obviously have to wait and see what happens there. But it looks like the timeline is a week, maybe a week and a half now for Freddie Andersen to come back. They've got 4 goalies they're going to have to deal with. So they got to figure out exactly how they're going to maneuver that, who's going to get either moved or sent on waivers. But Carolina likes their positioning in net with Freddie coming back. Now it's a matter of how do we add in other areas on this club? Can we add a depth piece up front in the mid-6 that can help us add a little extra secondary scoring to a lineup that if, we saw last year, if a big guy goes down, they don't have that piece that can step in and provide some extra scoring punch. So I think that's going to be something Donnie Waddell's going to look to add. But as we know, historically, Carolina does not cough up too much or too many big assets for short-term plays. So they're going to go bargain hunting for sure.
What about Jake Allen?
Well, Jake Allen has that extra year on his contract, and that gives teams a little bit of controllability, I guess, because he does have that extra year. Now, he's got a 7 or 8 team no trade list, so he has a little bit of say in where he could potentially end up. The Canadians would do this yesterday as well if they could, but they haven't found the right deal, and they don't want to just give him away. So if they can get something, a high draft pick as part of a deal for Jake Allen, I think they'll jump on that over these next couple of weeks. They wanted a little bit more. A second-round pick plus doesn't look like that's going to happen at this stage. But for teams that are looking to shore up that goaltending position, bring in some insurance, like a Colorado, for example, Jake Allen could be somebody on their radar.
Dave, let's shift the focus to the blue line, and Noah Hannafin's the big name, another Calgary Flame that could be on the move before March 8th. I think Hanifin would be a great fit with the Maple Leafs. I know that's been in the rumblings. They need help on defense. They just aced the Morgan Rielly suspension, going 5-0 in his absence, so props to them. But you think that's the best fit for Hanifin, or is there somebody else out there?
Well, that just means they're going to go 0-5 the next 5, right? Like the motivation's done. So, yeah, the hockey guys will have some fun with them. Look, they'd love to get Hanifin. They like Tanev as well. They want to shore up that back end. And Hannafin's a guy that they'd like. New Jersey has interest in, Tampa has interest in, Boston, and so on. There are a lot of teams that have been asking about Noah Hanifin. The problem is a lot of these teams either don't have the overall asset pool or they don't have the cap space. It's one or the other. So Toronto is going to have to get very creative, even if Calgary retains. And my understanding is the Flames are more likely or more willing to retain on an expiring deal versus, obviously, Markstrom, who's got a couple more years left. So if they can make the money work in some fashion, then I think Toronto has a shot. But they're right up against it. They're going to have to – it's basically money in, money out. They're going to have to get creative, maybe even bring in a third party. But again, their asset pool, not the deepest. They don't want to trade their first-round pick for a rental, although in the case of Hanifin, I wonder if they budge there. And teams have been asking about some of their top kids, and they're saying no. So Brad Treliving's been looking for deals, literally. He just hasn't been able to find them yet.
Fair enough. And, of course, the Tampa Bay Lightning seem to be lurking in the weeds when it comes to Hanifin and other defensemen, especially with Mikhail Sergachev and that long-term injury. The Pittsburgh Penguins, Dave, are so intriguing to me. I don't know what they thought they were doing when they went all in, and now apparently Erik Karlsson could be out there again. Like, here we go again with that team. My opinion, they're going to miss the playoffs. The biggest piece available, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jake Guentzel. This guy is a playoff performer. He's had so many brilliant years with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Is it fair to say this guy's going to be dealt, and where do you think he ends up?
Well, they keep saying they want to wait to the deadline, which is what we originally heard about a month or so ago, and they're grasping and holding on as much as they can to their playoff hopes. I mean, good luck, but it's going to be a tough ride over these next. I think they have 7 or 8 games before the trade deadline, and a lot of them are pretty impactful, 4-point games as well. So unless they go on an incredible heater here, maybe somebody there needs to get suspended. If they can go on some type of heater, then maybe it changes Dubas's mindset a little bit. But he's going to want to wait this out. The problem there is teams that have interest in Jake Guentzel, like Edmonton and the Avs and a couple others, with his cap hit, they're going to need Pittsburgh to retain. They're going to look elsewhere. They don't want to wait and be holding, the bag, an empty bag with nothing to show for it. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Penguins actually do wait until, the day before the deadline or smack on March 8th. The biggest thing is they would love to keep him. There's no secret. The problem is for them, he wants to contend over the duration of his next contract. It's inevitable that Pittsburgh at some point is going to rebuild. And if he signs an 8-year deal, at best, 4 years, they'll be moderate playoff contenders, and then you've got to rebuild. That's not something he wants to do. Writing seems to be on the wall there. And the further they go down the standings, the more likely it is that he'll be moved. But there will be other teams that are going to knock on the door to see if they can make something happen here, not just the ones I mentioned. You're going to have other clubs. Do the Rangers do the Florida Panthers, who have cap space, the Rangers as well, because Heedle's on LTIR, who's going to get creative enough to try to pull this off to put them over the edge? That's going to be the interesting one around this situation.
It wouldn't be an NHL Fantasy on Ice episode if Nick did not bring up Jake Guentzel for maybe the fourth consecutive week in a row, but I'm going to follow suit and talk about the same team I talk about every week, Dave, because not enough people are talking about this team. You're in Montreal right now. If you look out of your window, maybe you'll see them. The Ottawa Senators, Vladimir Tarasenko, Jacob Chychrun. Those are two pieces that just don't get enough talk because, honestly, they've proven themselves in the past. If Jacob Chychrun's healthy, he's showcased how good he is, and it seems like there's just too much depth in Ottawa for them to fit in. So I wonder if their personal value increases if they get moved and where you think they might be going.
Yeah, I mean, Tarasenko specifically, I'll throw Dom Kubalik. He's out there as well. They're trying to move him. But with Tarasenko, $5 million cap hit, depending where he ends up, maybe there's a little bit of retention. The sleeper team in this situation for me, even though they don't need him necessarily, the Florida Panthers. I wouldn't be surprised. He would go there from my understanding and join that club. Do they want to add this piece? And if they do, where is he going to fit on this roster? He's going to be happy playing third line minutes if that's where they end up, adding him as they try to get back to the final. He wants to chase another Stanley Cup. It's going to be, you're looking at those kinds of teams, but the teams that have cap space are the ones that are going to kind of potentially win out in the Vlad race there. Chychrun, hockey trade. If it happens, it's going to be talent for talent. He's out there. He's aware of it. The team obviously is aware of it. They're the ones having conversations with other clubs about it, but they're looking to fill holes in other areas. So if they can create a market and build a hockey-type trade, either getting somebody on that right side of the decor or upgrading up front even further for this group, that's what Steve Staios is looking to do. The other name that I'll throw out there that's making the rounds, it's not that Ottawa is shopping him, but teams are having conversations or trying to have conversations with Ottawa about Josh Norris. He's been battling some injury issues. He's got a pretty hefty cap hit, 7.25, I believe. But he is young. If this does happen, this is another big hockey trade type of scenario. But his name has been out there for the last little while. I didn't really want to believe it. But teams have been saying that they're having conversations about him. Doesn't mean Ottawa's going to move him, just like they don't have to move Chychrun. But teams are poking around on Josh Norris.
Wanted to ask you about Anaheim. They were already involved in a big trade so far, sending Drysdale for Cutter Gauthier earlier in the season. And now so many other players, either with intriguing contract situations, or even if you include Trevor Zegras and his flair. I know he's injured right now, but if he's moved, that could be a big shakeup before the deadline. I know they say ducks fly together, but they could have a bunch of different flights flying out of there in the next couple of weeks, Dave.
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, you've got, Silfverberg, you've got Henrique, you've got Lyubushkin on expiring deals. You have Frankie Vatrano, who's got an extra year in his contract, that a lot of teams that want to add extra scoring, that secondary punch for the second line, add to their power play. He's right there, and they're willing to listen on him. We mentioned Gibson earlier. If they could find the right situation for him, they'll do it. And Zegras, I think, is probably more of a summer move. I think we're going to have a pretty active draft season, to be perfectly honest with you. Right around that time in June at the Sphere, the league would certainly love it, add more fireworks to everything that's going on there. And it's, from what I'm being told, they're putting on a hell of a production for the draft at the Sphere, so that'll be exciting. In terms of the Ducks, they could make two moves and just hang tight and move Henrique and Lyubushkin, or they could really go all out. It really depends on what comes Pat Verbeek's way, their GM. But a lot of activity, a lot of potential movement. They're going to be busy, I think. And I think we'll see more than two coming out of Anaheim. You're right, though. Zegras would be the nice, fun, sexy topic to discuss around trade deadline. We'll see if anybody steps up. The city I'm in, we talked about Montreal. They've poked around.
I just don't know why you would trade Trevor Zegras right now with his value the way it is. I would build it up and then trade him, but again, easier said than done. A wild card team for me, and that's where they're at in the standings right now in the Western Conference, Dave, is the St. Louis Blues. We've heard Pavel Buchnevich's names out there, maybe a Colton Parayko. Doug Armstrong is always a wild card. You never know what the guy's thinking. He goes big or goes home, which we love about him here in the NHL world. But what do you anticipate St. Louis doing?
If they move guys out, they're bringing others in. So if Buchnevich is really on the move, they're going to bring in somebody to offset that offensive loss and that position in the lineup. Parayko and Krug are two guys that have full no trade clauses. They're both at $6.5 million. They both have term. Krug was almost traded to Philly in the summer. He implemented his no trade clause. This is a situation where if the Blues can get the right deal in place for either of these guys, I think that they would definitely look at that and try to see and potentially convince one of these guys to accept the move. I think it's a combination for them of potential lateral move right now on D, but bringing in somebody that can fill the void, but is on an expiring contract that gives them a lot more flexibility cap-wise in the summer. I think that's part of the objective if they look at it, even though they're in the last wild card spot right now in the Western Conference. You said it. Doug Armstrong's not afraid to make some big, bold moves. No difference here.
Dave, there's been the big three teams that we've talked about for the past couple of seasons, waiting for one of them to finally turn things around and make it into the postseason. That's the Ottawa Senators, Buffalo Sabres, Detroit Red Wings, and it seems like Detroit's the one team that made it out of the pack. But I just want to ask you, what's their game plan right now? Because sometimes they're looking good. Sometimes they're barely holding on to a wild card spot. You wonder if they accidentally just jumped the gun a little bit too early by a season or two, and maybe they should have waited a bit longer. Like, are they going for the whole thing? If so, what do they need to add? Because that's the one team where I can't place my mind around them.
Yeah, and they're hesitant too on exactly what they are right now, Anna. And I think this is a team that they're going to approach the deadline with caution. If they're still in the mix as they are right now, they're going to hold on to their guys and just see if they can keep going. Because as part of winning or building a team, winning enters that equation, and you want to have that winning philosophy in there. Steve Yzerman knows that, very, very well. So if you have an opportunity to hold on to some of your veteran pieces and maintain that playoff race and get into the postseason, give your younger guys some playoff experience, that's very valuable to a team on the grow. And Detroit, that's where they are right now. They don't know if they're a better team than they've proven. They don't know if they're ahead of the game a little bit. So they just want to kind of tread and see what they're going to do. What they're not going to do is mortgage any of their young talent or prospect pool for short-term fixes. They're not going to enter the rental market to do any of that. So Detroit, they're almost like Philly, where we haven't expected this yet, but they're not really going to veer off course. Like if something falls into their lap, Stevie Yzerman will look at it, but we'll see where they end up.
Can't forget too, they made their big acquisition when they got Patrick Kane, which is obviously not insignificant in the slightest. Speaking of which, the Vegas Golden Knights, here we go again. Every year, same story at the deadline. Jack Eichel on LTIR. Mark Stone's now banged up. They made the big trade last year, which I thought put them over the top in acquiring an Ivan Barbashev. What do you envision? What do you want to see here from the Vegas Golden Knights? Because I think they have a serious chance of repeating, actually.
They do. They feel they do. They played a lot of hockey. That's why, some of these guys are getting a little banged up here. Mark Chasseau's a free agent at the end of the season. They have to deal with that situation. Does he go out with a bang? Do they repeat and go 2 for 2? They're going to try, and depending on the longevity of these injuries, it's going to give Kelly McCrimmon a little bit of opportunity here to potentially add. And if they have the cap space, if the guys are legitimately out until mid to end of April, then okay, we've got a little bit of, let's take advantage of this situation and let's add to this group if we can. I don't think they're going to go as big as they potentially have in the past. Something like a Barbashev type of move where you're getting a guy with a solid cap hit that can contribute at both ends of the ice. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I think if they could add a little bit of extra offense to this group, even though they're doing as well as they have been, you can never have enough. I think as long as they find the right pieces, and that's the thing with Vegas and even Florida for that matter, we could see a repeat of the final here if things work out. They want to add, but they want to add the right pieces that work both on and off the ice. If you can find the guys that gel in your room, that's almost as impactful as how well they can perform on the ice. So I think for both of these teams, it's a chemistry ad as much as it is a talent ad.
And not to rain on this parade, but I think to a degree maybe teams learned something from the last couple of years, specifically the Rangers last year, where you pick up Tarasenko, you pick up Kane. These big moves never work. Picking up goalies never work at the trade deadline. It's all about those Swiss Army knife type players. And on top of that, there's just not many brand names out there, especially after Lindholm and Monahan have gone. Dave, thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to March 8th here.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, guys.
Dave Pagnotta, the Fourth Period, Sirius XM, NHL Network Radio, and NHL Network, and insiding, of course, and being an insider there. But Pete, intriguing times for the Vegas Golden Knights. We just talked about it. Mark Stone goes down. This is big, big news. They got the Leafs coming up on Thursday. Have won 5 in a row. They're top 6 right now. Barbashev, Waugh, Marchessault, Stevenson, Carlson, Cotter. So I think externally is where you're going to get your replacement options for Mark Stone. This is not day-to-day, by the way. Gabe Vilardi, we talked about him last podcast, last 3 games, 4 goals, 4 assists. I like Jake Neighbors, Wyatt Johnston, Patrick Kane in a 5-game point streak. But this is a pretty big loss, Pete, for the Vegas Golden Knights.
Right, and Vegas always makes big splashes in free agency and at the deadline. This is not unfamiliar territory, Anna, with Stone, potentially going on long-term IR. They said he's going to be out for a while. We all remember that happened last year. They got him back conveniently for the first game of the playoffs and went on to win the Stanley Cup. So, I think that they have the pieces in-house to hold down the fort, but with Eichel out as well, sounds like he's on track to return sometime soon, but we don't quite know when. They get Theodore back, they lose Stone. The defending champs have their work cut out for them here.
I don't know, guys. With Vegas, it's like I'm watching like the same movie every single year where the same guy gets hurt, something happens, they go on a deep postseason run, and everyone's like, shouldn't have doubted the Vegas Golden Knights. So you know what? I'm not going to doubt them. We're going to see how this pans out, but it just seems like I've seen this film before, so...
No, it's fair. I'm starting to doubt Victor Arvidsson. I won't lie, guys. It just seems like that type of year. Comes back for a couple games. Obviously, I play the shot prop against Columbus. Gets hurt the second shift in. So bravo, fantastic. So he's week to week. LA, the new coach bump is real again. They're 5-1-0 under Jim Hiller. Important things to stress here. Cam Talbot, 3 appearances, 1.72, 9.43. Quentin Byfield, arguably the goal of the season, 7 points in 6 games. Even our guy, Anna, as you picked out last podcast, Pierre-Luc Dubois, 6 points in the last 6 under Hiller. And then Brandt Clarke, as you referenced, Pete, 4 points in the last 4. A lot of value right now in LA. Tough news on Arvidsson.
Definitely, and it's a shame he's not going to be there against his former team on Thursday, but that's a huge game for the playoff picture. Big win for Nashville against St. Louis on the road the other day, so they're hanging around with the deadline looming, and that's the rematch for that game right before the All-Star break that the Kings won. Then they, pulled the trigger with the coaching change and stuff like that. But we're getting to the nitty-gritty here in the playoff race and a bunch of teams involved.
Nick alluded to it. Goal of the year, goal of the last maybe 5 years, Quentin Byfield. I mean, I have to tip the cap. I got to give him a clap.
That was nice.
I mean, that was a great goal. And he should get extra fantasy points for something like that. That was ridiculous. End-to-end rush, loses the stick. I mean, off balance. Wow, Anna. Wow, you loved it too. I know you did.
I did love it. Maybe not as much as you. I don't think it got me that much. But it was a phenomenal goal. Quentin Byfield really coming to his own. Adrian Kempe, too. He has 4 in his last 4, so another player. My man, Jim Hiller, guys. He's the players' coach turning the LA Kings around.
The new coach bump. You love to see it in the NHL world. You also love to see our friends over at Skip, who delivered this question, ties in perfectly. Byfield or Slavkovsky in a keeper league, Pete? Who would your answer be? Because I don't know. Slavkovsky's been fantastic, but Quentin Byfield gaining steam by the game here in LA.
Yeah, really encouraging for Byfield what he's done with the breakout season this year. And in general, even though the Kings have been up and down, I think I just like the trajectory and makeup of that team overall. The goaltending, a little bit suspect, no doubt about it. But you could say the same thing about Montreal. And Montreal's a one-line team right now. The Kings at least have that wealth of riches in terms of the depth.
There wasn't an answer there, Pete.
Byfield.
Okay, there we go.
I trust the team more.
I'll take devil's advocate here that I'm going with Slav. I feel like I'm using your logic against you because it is a one-line team, but that means more ice time, more time on the puck for Slavkovsky, and he's really come to his own. As long as he's on that line, I don't care if the Canadians win or lose games, guys. They're going to be producing if he's playing with Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki.
Yeah, my answer would probably be Slavkovsky as well. Probably a recency bias because he's on that top line, but there's just some certain swagger to Slavkovsky. Love his frame, too, not to mention Byfield's a bigger boy, too. But I think if you'd ask me what you are right now, I would go with Slavkovsky, just playing with a lot of confidence, and I think maybe a bit of a higher ceiling than Byfield. Both players projecting to be really, really strong players coming up here in the near future, and already right now, Pete.
Right, and another young player that's been coming on strong here, correlating with I know the Wild had a bad loss the other day to Winnipeg, but they've been playing pretty well of late in the thick of the playoff race. Marco Rossi quietly is tied with Connor Bedard for the rookie lead in goals with 17, and he's only one behind him in even strength points. So get back in on the hype train of Marco Rossi. I know we've liked that guy at different points in his career, and he's come up empty or at different points, but he's actually putting together a really nice balanced season this year, and against the odds, I think.
He's playing well, and he doesn't even have decent lineup placement right now. So you wonder if they reward him and he kind of moves up that trajectory on the Wild lineup. This Minnesota team looks like they're going to make the postseason, guys, dare I say it. Like, they've really turned things around, and they have all the pieces, and they're close enough to make it happen. I think this is the time to buy in on the Minnesota Wild, because they're going to make a push for it in these last couple of months.
I think when it comes to Rossi in general, it's a great story, and I think it just shows you that patience is a virtue. I mean, almost to the degree of what New Jersey did with Jack Hughes, where it took a while, then he really cooked and really started going at the NHL level. If you recall, a couple of years back with Rossi, people were starting to question that pick, and it really wasn't working out at that time. But he's had the opportunity this season. I sort of disagree with Minnesota. Again, the whole Parise and Suter thing is hanging in my mind. Like, you're paying two guys that much money not to be on your roster. And I think adding at the deadline is going to be difficult. I think if there were a year for Minnesota to retool or whatever you want to call it, it's this year. And that's why they intrigue me beyond belief leading up to the March 8th trade deadline. Who delivered the most for you in fantasy hockey this week? It's time for the Deliver of the Week, brought to you by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL. Who do you have, Pete?
I have Brandon Hagel. I was just thinking back to what a major trade that was for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs this year, but Brandon Hagel, recently playing on a separate line from Kucherov and Point, he is 6th in the entire NHL in even strength points. That's an incredible stat. Of course, there's the Kucherov bump whenever they're playing together, but he's providing the Lightning with really important secondary scoring right now.
For me, it's got to be Gabe Vilardi. He's on a different level. He's got 8 points, 4 goals in just his past 3 games. Despite what's happening in LA, I still think Winnipeg comes out on top in that trade. So give me Vilardi for my delivery this week.
Doesn't have to be a winner, right? I think both parties could win. I'm going to go with a Johnny Laz favorite, and it's not Alexi Lafreniere. It's Igor Shesterkin. Since the All-Star break, 4-0-0 at 2.26, 937, 1 shutout, taking that New York Rangers crease back. Those are your deliveries of the week, brought to you by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL. As we tie a bow on this thing, just wanted to mention Evgeny Malkin's got 3 goals in the last 20. John Tavares picked up his first 5-on-5 goal in 28 games. Like, a lot is happening right now in the fantasy world, guys, and I'm looking forward to March 8th. We thank Dave Pagnotta for his time today, Pete.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did also want to just touch on Shea Theodore's return. Like, do you guys consider him to be ahead of Pietrangelo in the pecking order for the rest of the season? Do you have concerns about the player? Like, to me, he's a top 15, top 20 fantasy defenseman bona fide. What do you think, Anna?
Yeah, I think so. I like Shea Theodore. I think he's a good category coverage guy, too. Whenever he's back in the lineup and he's healthy, I think he is first up in that pecking order, and he's proven himself to me. If he's healthy, he's a guy I want on my roster.
I think if you're a fantasy owner, I'm probably staying away from anything Vegas. As Dave Pagnotta put it, I mean, these guys have played a lot of hockey since last year, and they're just getting really, really banged up. And then I mentioned that top 6. I mean, there's no Eichel, there's no Stone, there's a Marchessault. But, yeah, I would put him ahead. I would definitely put him ahead of an Alex Pietrangelo in the pecking order, Pete.
We got a nice little Thursday slate here. Spots, picks we like. One that jumps out to me, the New Jersey Devils at the Prudential Center. The high-flying New York Rangers are on their way across the river. The Devils will win the game tonight. That price is around even money for the Devils. Nicholas, I don't want to say one of the plays of the year, but I really like the Devils tonight off that embarrassment the other day.
Yeah, I like that too. I need to see some desperation from that team, and certainly it is a fishy line, but I've already pounded the New Jersey Devils, so hopefully they win that game. The other one I would look at, Vancouver, they've lost 3 in a row for the first time this season. I know Seattle always plays them well, but give me the Canucks in that game. I like the over between Colorado and Detroit as well, Pete.
I'm feeling what Bob is saying there about the Devils. I think you could even get a little greedy there with the puck line. If you want to say it's going to be a close game, maybe the Devils leading and get an empty netter. You could get something like plus 200 I saw on the Devils to win by 1.5 goals, and I think it could happen with the bounce back trend there.
I'll make it 3. I like the New Jersey Devils in this matchup, guys. No shocker there. Jack Hughes, anytime goal, perhaps. It was the Nico Hischier show outside at Stadium Series, so I feel like it's going to be the Jack Hughes show when we return back to the Rock.
And also, in addition to what Dave was saying about the cap space for Filip Chytil out for the season, Blake Wheeler's out for the season too, and Artemi Panarin, keep an eye on that situation, uncertain for Thursday with a lower body injury. They called him day-to-day, Nick.
Yep, you talk about uncertain. We escaped another podcast where I didn't bring up your beloved Arizona Coyotes have now dropped 11 straight games. I do not know what's going on with that team, man. Like, we'll tackle that next week. I think we have the NHL Action collab back in the mix. We're going to talk about that, guys. And Pete, also coming up on Monday, Week 20 waiver wire edition. I can't believe we're 20 weeks into this thing.
Yeah, and that's going to be definitely deadline focused. All the players we talked about already, but you know, there are some sneaky ones out there too that we didn't even really mention, like whoever the Sharks trade, if they trade Couture, if they trade Duclair, that's probably likely, but check out the NHL Fantasy Spin on nhl.com/fantasy for the full list of all the players that could be moved before the deadline because of their contract situations and stuff.
Love it. Perfect. Thank you once again to Dave Pagnotta for hopping on. Thanks to producer Bob Bender. For Pete Jensen and Anna Dua, I'm Nick Alberga. You've been listening to NHL Fantasy on Ice, delivered by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.